97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Geoff Mosher, powered by InsideTheBirds.com.
We expect to win every time we step on the field. That's just the mindset that we have.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
All right, let's get into it. Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Check out Inside the Birds podcast as the guys get into some off-season previews as we get ready for training camp. Some training camp previews, I should say. We're about 2 weeks away, we hope, for training camp. Remember, we're getting excited about the Sixers. Training camp's supposed to start before the Sixers resume, and the Flyers for that matter, and right after the Phillies do. So we will be there before we know it. Geoff Mosher from InsideTheBirds.com. He joins us for Football at 4 on this Monday edition. It's a lot to dive into today, including DeSean Jackson, who on Friday, Moshe, the Eagles put out a statement that essentially wasn't even very clear of what they were going to do. I guess it's a fine that is coming down. It wasn't really mentioned in the statement that we are fining him or anything, but is that what the punishment will be for DeSean Jackson, a fine?
Well, it's a lot of what we've talked about. It's a fine. He has work to do in the community as far as being a better advocate for equality going forward. That's not to say he has to do this every single day of the week, but he obviously has been soliciting the advice or input from some religious leaders with the help of Michael Rubin from the Sixers, minority owner, and he's already had, I believe, a couple, I guess what they would say, Zoom sessions, since he can't really visit with them. He's still in Tampa. And I would say that DeSean's a little bit on a probation, and I put that in quotes. I mean, it's not officially, but he obviously has to tread carefully over the next week or two until the start of camp with what he says and does on social media. Certainly anything that would be similar to what he had tweeted that started this whole mess, or I'm sure shared, I should say, on Instagram. Anything in that kind of vein, or maybe even liking another post that defended him, as he did the day after his apology, probably would land him in hot water again. So he's going to be on the team and fine as long as he does what he's supposed to do, and then obviously pays this fine, which I imagine he will do.
So, I mean, at this point, he has taken a lot of steps, as you mentioned, and he's got other things kind of lined up. So he sounds like his actions are backing his words. Do we feel that this is, for all intents and purposes, behind DeSean and the Eagles?
I don't know. It's tough to say. Riley Cooper, and I not that everything is apples to apples. I'm just trying to go back to a situation where it's somewhat similar, right? Riley Cooper left camp for a week. He was supposed to have sought counseling, which we were told he did. I don't know if anybody ever really checked into it, but he came back, and it would be easy to say that he served his sentence, and the team and everybody moves on. But he was tested. I think we talked about this last week. He got into a fight in that very first practice back. That really wasn't him getting into a fight, more as it was Kerry Williams starting a fight with him, and to see, to kind of test him. And I remember LaShawn McCoy was very, I would say, cold-shoulderish toward Riley Cooper. He wasn't so quick to give him forgiveness. So are we over it? No, I don't know if we're over it. Again, I think we've got this, what I would call, probationary period. And I think DeSean will probably be tested in ways that we can't think of. Maybe somebody else comes out and defends him and says he did nothing wrong. And there might be the temptation on his part to either side with that person or like it. I mean, he's really, again, got to be going down the right path here for the next week or two until training camp starts and he can get back into Philly and not have anything close to a slip-up, I think, or else he'd be on thin ice.
Knowing how upset and passionate Jeffrey Lurie is about this situation, it kind of blows my mind that Marquise Goodwin and Malik Jackson made some comments as well, and nothing has really been said about it. Do you expect that anything will come out about something with those two players needing to go through some sort of similar situation as DeSean Jackson?
Yeah, I don't know, Hunter, only because I think Malik Jackson has already deleted what he said. And if I remember correctly, and I told you guys last week, I'm trying to stay off unnecessary social media a lot. I post my work, but I think what he said was from Malik, right? He defended some of the things that Farrakhan has said, and maybe he's not familiar with everything Farrakhan has said. I don't know. It's always hard to know who knows what and who's heard what. And Goodwin, I don't. Can you refresh me on what Goodwin actually wrote that was controversial?
He said something about, he just said that what DeSean Jackson was claiming isn't as bad as people are kind of reacting and saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate. And, I think it would be smart of Jeffrey Lurie to really have, there's so much going on with COVID right now, and just the idea of whether a season's going to happen or not. But it may be smart for him to have religious leaders from all religions, have a rabbi, have a priest, have an imam, all come to the NovaCare at different times and talk to the entire team and try to educate everybody similarly on every culture and religion. And people could say, hey man, this is football. There's no place for that. It's not necessary. But I'm never of the opinion that a little education doesn't hurt. You see teams do things off the field all the time for, unity purposes, right? Or team building camaraderie purposes. So it sounds like in the aftermath of all this, it wouldn't be a bad idea for the Eagles to do something like that, for Jeffrey Lurie to have something like that in place.
Geoff Mosher's with us. Don't forget to check out the Inside the Birds podcast. And Moshe, so the Eagles penalized Jackson for conduct detrimental. So what's the message here from Jeffrey Lurie and the Eagles? Is this they were not hard enough or tough enough on Jackson? Did they what do you think the message looks like from the Eagles and to their players? I mean, I thought the Riley Cooper thing, the difference is Riley had to walk back into the locker room with a primarily African-American roster and face those guys. DeSean Jackson doesn't have to do that.
No, and that's why maybe there's a little bit more on the side of, whereas Riley had to go away for a week and seek counseling, and people are saying, well, why does DeSean have to go talk to religious leaders and do all this extra work? I don't know how much of it is really extra. Some of it sounds like DeSean, say the Julian Edelman thing might be voluntary. Either way, but the reactions are a little different because the circumstances are different. They're not in camp like they were during the Riley Cooper time and everything like that. So obviously the reactions can't be the exact same, but the fines are probably similar, and it's never disclosed how much each individual is fined by the team. But I would imagine that they're fairly similar. And I think to answer the question about what the message sent is that no one person can tell you what the message is because everyone interprets it differently. There are a lot of people who feel and still feel that Riley Cooper should have been cut. And this, DeSean going through it now just exemplifies that Riley should have been cut and released immediately. And so should DeSean, because the team and the organization should take a harder stance against, bigotry and anti-Semitism and prejudice and things like that. There are some people who will say that it's more important to build somebody up and help them learn and give them a second chance. And you can throw Michael Vick in there as well, although that was a little bit different. And the Eagles are known for doing that, and they should be praised for doing that. So it just depends on how you personally inside feel things like this should be dealt with. If you're a hardliner, you feel like the Eagles have been too soft on both of the individuals. If you are someone who believes in rehabilitation and hope that something good can come from something bad, then you probably support what the Eagles have done. I tell you this though.
Oh, go ahead, Moshe.
Let me just say this: if DeSean Jackson stays healthy, catches 10 touchdowns, has 1,000-yard season, or even 800-yard season, even if he has 2 touchdowns in the opener like last year, I know a lot of people who criticize the organization and say they'll never root for DeSean are suddenly going to find it in their hearts to be able to forgive him and root for him again, because we all know that hypocrisy reigns supreme in our society.
Did this officially break any rules when it comes to his contract and the guaranteed money?
Well, if they're fining him for conduct detrimental, I believe then that is at least there. Everything, Hunter, as you know, has to come down to, like grievances and court battles and appeals and things like that. But I believe if them fining him for conduct detrimental would be the first step toward getting out of guaranteed money if they wanted to go down that road.
Geoff Mosher here. Football for Moshe. Let's get to the offensive line, I want to ask you something about. Now, Pro Football Focus, take them for what they're worth, but they rank the offensive lines entering this season coming up. The Eagles line was number 1 at the end of last year. Pro Football Focus said they were the best line in football. Now, they have them ranked number 10 entering this season. That's with Dillard at left and Pryor most likely at right guard. So my question is, number 1, are you surprised at that ranking? And number 2, if they are not the number 1 line, meaning they're one of the best lines in football, how much does that hurt the offense?
Well, that's a my answer would have to be based on whether I truly believed that the Eagles were the number 1 offensive line in the league last year. I thought they were very good because offensive line play is really bad, and we talk about that all the time around the league. And I think that the fact that they're 10th, despite losing a future Hall of Famer at left tackle and a 3 or 4 time Pro Bowler at right guard, speaks to the talent that they have right now at right tackle with Lane Johnson and at center with Jason Kelsey, both players who have made both the Pro Bowl and All-Pro teams. So they still have a lot more talent than the rest of the league, but they certainly have questions that would knock them down to 10. That's fair and justifiable. And I would say other teams that may lose 1 or 2 players on an offensive line who have made the Pro Bowl would probably drop even further because not many teams have 4 or 5 guys that made the Pro Bowl. But I will say last year, I'm a little surprised by the number 1 overall ranking because, I thought Baltimore's line was excellent. And I thought the Eagles were a little inconsistent at times. They specifically struggled against teams that played a lot of line games like Dallas, a lot of twisting and stunting. There was a lot of confusion at times on the left side of the line with Sayamalu and Peters picking up those ET stunts that we talk about a lot, end tackle stunts. And, we had Greg Cosell on our Inside the Birds podcast, I think about a month ago, and we were breaking down every single NFC East team in each of the 4 podcasts. And we talked about the Eagles offensive line. He did say that he felt in his studying of Carson Wentz and the Eagles offense, all tape review last year, that he felt the Eagles offensive line was inconsistent, particularly in pass protection last year. So, again, that's where we talk about PFF and kind of the gradings and what that means. And maybe PFF just in general feels that the Eagles offensive line played better than the other team's offensive line for the entirety of the year. And yeah, you probably can say that at stretches that they did. I don't know if they were the best. But they are pretty good, and they definitely have 2 big questions now at left tackle and right guard.
Yeah, one spot I thought was interesting that they did mention was Sayamala, who they said had problems. He allowed 42 pressures, 4th most among guards in the league last year. Now on Dillard, I thought this was interesting when it comes to Andre Dillard. They had him at Washington State as the one of the 5th best pass blocking grade they have ever seen from any college player. So, and I think a lot of us have thought that Dillard will be a good pass blocker. It's the run blocking that we have yet to really see him kind of show in the NFL.
Well, I would say it's 2 things. It's 1, run blocking and his ability to, really toughen up in the trenches. Although I've talked to people in the NFL that feel that no matter what, he's always going to be a better pass blocker than run blocker just in his nature, and that he's always going to struggle against the power rusher, the bull rusher. Last year, it's not just strength. Last year, and Trey Thomas was on with us on one of our ITB TVs that you can see on our YouTube channel. He just noted how his hands can be very slow at times to get up and in position and into a punch position, and because of that, guys can get the best of him. And you saw that on several occasions last year. So if he can improve his hand technique, and of course, I don't know how he's doing that without the ability to really work with any of his coaches right now. And that's what makes it such a big question mark. But he really does have to improve with his use of hands if he wants to take that next step up. It doesn't mean he can't do it. It just, or hasn't been working on it this offseason. We just don't know because we haven't seen it. But I do wonder, and I made mention of this when he was drafted. He had a great year coming off that he had with Washington State. But that was the year that there were so many pass rushers drafted, and I don't think any of the top ones that year came from the Pac-12. So I'm curious what kind of level of competition he was seeing from pass rushers, specifically bull rushers, in college, and that might have helped him out a little bit that he didn't have to face that level of premier bull rusher.
It looks like Lane Johnson and some other offensive linemen are in Texas right now for a summit. What exactly is going on there?
Yeah, no, it's not right now. I believe it was over. I think it was Friday and Saturday. It was a 2-day summit. They've been doing it for a couple of years now. Lane Johnson actually started it up with Duke Manyweather, who is a kind of renowned offensive line instructor, private instructor. And they put together this summit for offensive linemen to, work on their hand usage and work on things that they've normally done it outdoors in a complex. Obviously, they moved it inside to the Omni this year in Frisco, Texas, which is about a half hour north of Dallas. And so, obviously there's a big risk in that. I mean, Dallas area, the whole state of Texas has been hit hard by COVID. I believe I wrote in the story on InsideTheBirds.com that last week they had 3 days of over 10,000 new cases, or around 10,000 new cases a day. So that's not, great for them. And so it was a little bit risky. They were indoors. I saw some videos tweeted from there. Some guys were wearing masks. They did say that they were taking steps to be as safe as possible. But the bottom line is it's a risk. And by the way, Matt Pryor was there as well. So, that's one of your big question marks there. And it was a 2-day event. And we'll see what happens. Well, hopefully both of those guys will report when they're supposed to report and won't have any issues, and we'll be able to pass their tests.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Inside the Birds podcast. Make sure you check out more from the guys as they go deeper into the Eagles getting ready for training camp here. I want to get into, I saw best case, worst case scenarios for Eagles, and I threw out, I looked at some of the things. They had low end 5-11, and basically suggesting that Rieger, Slay, Roby Coleman, they listed as offseason additions, not enough to help them. DeSean Jackson failed to help. Injuries bother Alshon Jeffrey. They don't have a corner on the outside across from Slay. This is worst-case scenario stuff. And then last was the offensive line is not as dominant as it once were. So that was their low end, 5-11. Now, on the high end, it was 10-6, and that Wentz remains healthy, and he has a year close to 2017. Rager stretches the defenses, opens things underneath. Ertz has a big year, and then defensively, Fletcher, Javon, Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, and Malik Jackson are too much for other teams to handle. My point is, if that all happens, is 10-6 the best mark you see them at? Is if you got Fletcher, that defense playing like that, and Wentz playing like he did in 2017, is this a 10-6 team?
No, I mean, I think the potential to win more than 10 games is there if everything goes right and some of the young guys that they rely on, whether it's rookies or second-year players, do make that step that you want them to take. You're right. They have a lot of talent, Mike. I mean, that's fair. So even if they struggle a little bit, which we expect in some areas, they should be well-stocked in other areas to be competitive week in and week out. The only thing is there are certain things you can never see coming. Go back to 2005, the year after they go to the Super Bowl. Every single good player they had went on IR that year, and they finished 6-10. So, I mean, Andy Reid in 2012 had the dream team that went 4-12, right? So sometimes the unexpected happens, and you just have no idea. But I think that there's enough talent on this team that they should be in that, 7 to 10 window, I would think.
I would, 5-11, that whole scenario seems like, hey, look, we had to come up with a low end. This would be what happened. But that's 5-11 just sounds like, somebody got hurt, probably Wentz, and the wheels just kind of really fell off. I was really surprised. Not really surprised. I mean, hey, look, worst case scenarios happen. They happen all the time. If a worst case scenario happened outside of Wentz getting hurt, what would that be?
Oh, that's a good point, because you're right. The only thing you can say, if Wentz got hurt, there's no Josh McCown right now. There's no Nick Foles. There's just really Nate Sudfeld and obviously rookie Jalen Hurts and Kyle Lauletta. So, yeah, that would be a very feasible implosion that you could see if Wentz were to get hurt for the whole year. If he were to stay healthy, I'm trying to think the last time an Eagles quarterback stayed healthy, like a good Eagles quarterback like McNabb or even Foles or anybody that we can think of stayed healthy, and the team still really just was terrible. I think in 2012, when they were 4-12, I don't remember how many games Vic started that year. I just can't remember off the top of my head. He started 10, and he was 3-7. So they just had everything go wrong, and they had a lot of injuries that year too. I think that if this team got hit hard on the D line again, they'd be in trouble because they with injuries. I mean, because even though they added Darius Slay, I mean, he's just one guy, and there's a lot of still question marks in the secondary. There's no Malcolm Jenkins. You know, we're figuring out Avonte Maddox being a starting outside corner. He's short. He's probably better meant for the slot, but right now he's going to start on the outside. You know, Kevon Wallace, you don't know how he's going to play at safety. Rodney McLeod's a little bit older. There's just not a whole lot of star power or you know, you can talk about in the secondary except for Darius Slay. And if you've got no pass rush, then they can just pick on anybody that Darius Slay isn't covering. So I would say if the defensive line had real major injury issues, you know, Brandon Graham goes down, Hargrave goes down, Cox goes down, then this defense overall, especially when we know the linebacker level isn't very good, is really going to it's going to hurt. I mean, they're going to give up a lot of points.
Speaking of defensive line, this is going to be a big year for Derek Barnett, and he intrigues me because sometimes you see him out there and it's like, okay, that's what we thought he could do, and then other times he's kind of quiet. So what does he need to do better this year to consider it a success?
Well, I think first he's got to stay healthy. You know, injuries are not necessarily his fault, but they hurt him last year. They hurt him a couple of years ago. He's missed too many games to get a really accurate judge on who he is. He's only played 20 games in the last 2 years. You know, I thought he had a nice rookie year. He had 5 sacks, and he was playing as a rotational piece. Had a couple of forced fumbles, and then the last 2 years have just been an incomplete picture. You know, last year he had 6.5 sacks in 14 games. If you play 16 games, gets you 8 sacks, you're okay with that. I mean, you know, Brandon Graham's made a career off getting about 8 sacks, but also being really good against the run and giving you a ton of tackles for loss. And that's something that Barnett, his first year, gave you a lot of tackles for loss as well. So, I think, and he had 10 last year in 14 games. So if he can do that, I think he can earn himself an extension. If not, there's a lot of guys, right? That's the one thing about the Eagles you can say. There's a lot of guys who are ready to take or looking for the opportunity to take his spot. There's Jannard Avery, there's Josh Sweat, there's Sharif Miller, just to name 3 right there. You know, the kid from Stanford that they drafted would love to make the team and show himself. Joe Osman's trying to come back from the injury that he had last year. So he's got certainly a lot of pressure to perform this year.
Don't forget, tomorrow, Andrew DeCecco's in for Football at 4. Check out the Inside the Birds podcast and InsideTheBirds.com. They've got some great new material up there as well. Geoff Mosher in for the Monday edition of Football at 4 here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Moshe, enjoy the rest of your day, pal.
All right, fellas. Thanks for everything. Have a great one.
Yep. And Geoff Mosher, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.